The east wing of Mercy Ridge Medical Center had a view of the parking structure and, if you leaned against the glass at the right angle, a strip of Iowa sky the color of old pewter. Dr. Marg Solsis stood at the window of her office on the 6th floor with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she had stopped drinking from 20 minutes ago. The knock at her door came at 8:04 in the morning. "Come in." The man who entered was tall, scrub top, dark green. The kind of shoulders that filled a doorway without trying. He held a clipboard at his side and did not look at the floor when he spoke. "Dr. Solis, you wanted to see me." She turned from the window. She set the mug down on the desk without looking for a coaster. "Mr. Callahan." She said his name the way she said most things, measured, precise, as though she had rehearsed it once and would not do so again. "The hospital's attendance system has flagged 11 late arrivals on your record in the past 8 weeks. For a charge nurse in the pediatric ICU, that is not a pattern I can overlook." He stood with his weight evenly distributed. He did not shift. He did not blink more than necessary. "I understand," he said. "Mercy Ridge cannot tolerate inconsistency in critical care staffing. You know this." She waited. She had done this before, waited for the apology or the excuse or the negotiation. He offered none of those things. He looked at her with the particular steadiness of a man who had already decided something she was not yet aware of. "Effective today," she said, "your position is terminated." He nodded once. He set the clipboard on the chair beside the door. He walked out. The door made a soft sound behind him. Margot stood in the middle of her office and listened to the quiet. On her desk, beside the cold coffee, was the attendance report her deputy administrator had printed and highlighted and placed there before 7 in the morning. She had not read past the summary page. She picked it up now. She did not know why. To understand why he did not say a single word, it is necessary to go back 6 hours. At 2:09 in the morning, the kitchen of a 2-bedroom rental on Birchwood Drive in Cedar Falls was lit by the stove light only. Theo Callahan stood at the sink in a gray t-shirt running cold water over his wrist, which he had scraped on the porch railing in the dark. He had been on the porch because his daughter had cried out in her sleep, and he had gone to check on her, and she had not been crying at all. She had been laughing, which was somehow harder to walk away from. Peanut was 7. Her name was Josie, but she had been Peanut since the morning she came home from the hospital and fell asleep on his chest the size of a paperback novel. She had her mother's ears and her mother's way of frowning at things she was thinking out hard about. Her mother had been gone 2 years. Not gone the way some people meant it. Gone completely. A Tuesday in February, a highway outside Waterloo, a patch of black ice the size of a dining room table. Josie did not know the full shape of it yet. She knew Mama was in heaven. She knew heaven was somewhere above the clouds because she had pressed her face to the airplane window on the way to her grandmother's in Phoenix and asked if that was where Mama lived, and Theo had said yes before he could stop himself, and she had said okay and pressed her nose back against the glass and looked very carefully for a long time. At 2:30, he checked her temperature, 101.2. He sat on the edge of her mattress and put a damp cloth on her forehead, and she looked up at him with half-open eyes. "Daddy," she said, "do I have to go to school?" "Not tomorrow." She reached up and put her hand on his forearm the way she had done since she was an infant, her whole fist wrapped around 2 of his fingers. He sat with her until 3:15, when her breathing evened out and her hand went slack. He carried his shoes to the hallway so the floorboards would not wake her. He put them on at the door. He drove to Mercy Ridge with the windows down and the radio off, and he arrived 11 minutes late. He did not note the reason in the system. He never noted the reasons. He had learned a long time ago that the line between an explanation and a complaint was thinner than people thought, and he preferred not to stand on either side of it. 7 miles south, Margot Solis had already been awake for 2 hours. She was 38. Dark blazer, silver stud earrings, hair secured with the precision of a woman who did not want it as a variable. 18 months earlier, her father had died of a cardiac event in the same hospital where she now ran the clinical operations division. He had founded Mercy Ridge's pediatric wing in 1991. His photograph hung in the lobby with a small plaque she walked past every morning without slowing down. The board had watched her inherit his position the way you watch someone pick up a glass that might be too full. She had not spilled anything yet. Her deputy administrator was a man named Preston Haig. 44, thin wrists, the particular smile of someone who had been waiting for a seat that kept not opening up. He had been at Mercy Ridge 11 years. Her father had overlooked him twice for promotion. He had placed the attendance report on her desk at 6:55 in the morning with a yellow sticky note that said 11 incidents. Board visibility issue. Your call. She had made the call at 8:04. At 8:22, Theo Callahan was in the locker room packing a canvas bag, his badge, a phone charger, a photograph of Josie taped to the inside of his locker door, which he peeled off carefully and put in his front pocket. Darnell Webb was at the next locker. 51 years old, respiratory therapist, forearms like dock rope. He had served 8 years in the Army before coming to Mercy Ridge, and he had a way of standing in doorways that made the doorway seem smaller. He looked at Theo's bag. He did not ask. Theo zipped the bag. You've got the 7 o'clock nebulizer on bed 4, he said. Briggs can pull the chart. Darnell nodded once. Tell Josie I said hey. Theo nodded. He walked down the corridor and through the lobby past the photograph of Gerald Solis, MD, founder pediatric wing, and out through the sliding glass doors into the gray morning. He drove to his mother-in-law's house on Orchard Street and sat in the truck for 4 minutes in the driveway. Carol Ingram was 63. She grew tomatoes in raised beds along the south fence, and she kept a spare key under the ceramic turtle by the back door, and she had not once in 2 years said anything to Theo that was not entirely true. He knocked. She came to the door in a housecoat with a coffee cup. She looked at his face. Come inside, she said. He told her. She listened. She refilled her coffee and did not offer him any, and then she said, What do you need? Can Josie stay a few nights as long as you need? He nodded. He did not look at the tomatoes on the way out. He drove to the city reservoir and parked on the gravel pull-off and watched the water for a while. The water was flat and greenish, and a pair of coots moved across the far edge without hurrying. He had a notepad in the glove box, and he wrote 3 numbers on the back of a grocery receipt. Savings, weeks of rent. Josie's piano lessons through the end of the semester. He folded the receipt and put it in his jacket pocket next to the photograph of his daughter. He was not afraid. He had been afraid before in a way that made this feel like a different category of problem entirely. He had been afraid in a field hospital outside Kandahar with his hands doing things his brain was still catching up to, and he had been afraid in a waiting room in Waterloo while a highway patrol officer explained what a patch of black ice the size of a dining room table had done to a Tuesday in February. This was not that. This was a problem with numbers. Numbers were solvable. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Preston Haig knocked on Margot's open door and tilted his head in a way she had learned to read as self-congratulation. Good decision this morning, he said. The board will notice. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and looked back at her screen. He left. After he left, she looked at the attendance report on the corner of her desk. She had not moved it. She had also not reread it. She did not reread it now, but she moved it to the center of the desk. At 6:15 in the evening, Margot was driving home on County Road F. It was October. The sky was the particular orange that Iowa saved for October and gave back in December. She had a dinner to be at by 7 and she was not going to make it, and she already knew it. The dashboard light came on at 6:28. The temperature gauge. She watched it climb for 60 seconds and then pulled onto the gravel shoulder and turned the engine off and listened to the ticking of metal contracting under the hood. She called roadside assistance. 55 to 60 minutes. She got out of the car. The shoulder was wide and flat, and a stand of cottonwoods ran along the fence line to the east. She waved at the first 3 cars. None of them slowed. She stopped counting after 9. The air smelled like turned soil and something burning, which was probably just her engine. Her heels had found the soft gravel immediately, and she had stopped trying to stand on them sideways. A semi went past, and the air pressure from it moved her hair across her face. At 6:51, a truck slowed from the north. Dark blue, older model, the kind of truck that had done actual work. It pulled onto the shoulder 30 feet ahead of her and sat with the hazards on. The door opened. The man who got out was tall, green jacket, the kind of shoulders that filled a doorway. She recognized the shape of him before she recognized his face. He walked toward her without hurrying. His boots made a sound on the gravel that the wind did not quite cover. Dr. Solis. She opened her mouth. Nothing useful came out. He looked at her car. He looked at the hood. He looked at her. How long has it been running hot? Since the gauge climbed. Maybe 20 minutes before that. He walked around to the front. He tried the hood latch, looked at her. May I? She nodded. He propped the hood and stood under it for a while with the small flashlight from his jacket pocket. She noticed it was not her flashlight. It was his. He had not asked her if she had one. Coolant line, he said. I can't patch it on the shoulder. You'd need a tow anyway. He lowered the hood until it latched. Where are you headed? Cedar Falls. Off Ridgeway. I can take you. She looked at him. The sun was almost down. The cottonwoods were black against the orange. You don't have to do that. Roadside assistance is going to be here after dark, and the shoulder isn't great, he said. It's not out of my way, he said the last sentence, simply, without performing generosity. As though it were a logistical fact and not a choice. She got in. The front passenger seat had a booster seat in it. In the booster seat was a 7-year-old girl with a fleece pullover the color of a stop sign and a look on her face that suggested she had been asleep until 30 seconds ago. This is Josie, Theo said as he climbed in. She runs warm, so if you're cold back there, the vent controls are on your side. The girl turned around and looked at Margot with the frank assessment of a child who had not yet learned to disguise her curiosity. You're pretty, Josie said. Josie. Theo's voice was mild. She is, Daddy. He pulled back onto the road. Margot looked at the girl's profile. There was a butterfly clip in her hair, pale yellow, holding a small piece that had escaped her braid. Margot thought of something and then stopped thinking it. She turned to the window. He drove 5 miles under the speed limit, no sharp turns. When a truck merged close on the highway, he moved right with a steadiness that required no visible adjustment. The radio stayed off. Josie fell back asleep with her head against the booster strap. On her lap was a library book, a picture book about a girl who planted a garden so large it took a whole town to harvest it. Margot sat in the back seat of a man she had fired 11 hours ago and watched Iowa go dark outside the window. The jacket she had borrowed from him, he had simply held it out without asking if she was cold, smelled like laundry, and something faintly antiseptic, which made sense, and underneath that something that did not come from a bottle, which was the smell of a person who showed up. None of her coats smelled like anything. She sat with the collar of the jacket against her face for most of the drive, and she did not examine why. What did I do this morning? The thought arrived without invitation. Who exactly is this man? He stopped in front of her building at 7:19. He did not turn off the engine. Josie was still asleep. She started to take the jacket off. Keep it, he said. Drop it off whenever. He said it the way he said most things, simply, as though there would be a whenever, as though that were given. She got out. She stood on the sidewalk with his jacket over her arm and watched his taillights until they turned at the corner. Then she sat down on her front steps. In a blazer that had cost $400 and heels that had ruined themselves on a gravel shoulder, she sat down on the cold concrete of her front steps, and she did not go inside. She sat there until the building's motion light timed out and left her in the dark. She did not sleep that night. By 6 in the morning, she was in the elevator going up. The board's operations committee met quarterly. That morning's session was the third quarter review, and the first member to arrive was a woman named Dr. Ruth Eklund, who had been on the Mercy Ridge board since Margot's father had recruited her in 2002. She was 70, retired surgeon, posture like a woman who had spent decades at an operating table and had not bothered to stop. She stepped off the elevator and stopped at the digital staff board, mounted near the administrative suite. The screen cycled through recent notices, a retirement announcement, a new clinic opening, and one line that read, employment terminated. Theo Callahan, RN, charge nurse, pediatric ICU. Ruth Eklund stood in front of that screen for a long time. Then she turned to the receptionist. Young lady, does Dr. Solis know who that man is? The receptionist looked uncertain. That will be the answer, Eklund said. Tell her I'd like 5 minutes before the meeting. 4 miles away, Theo was at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee he had poured at 5:45 and not yet touched. Josie was at Carol's for one more night. The apartment was the kind of quiet that had a shape to it. He had a call to return from the VA hospital in Iowa City. They needed per diem nurses with critical care background. He had not returned it yet. He would this afternoon. He had the shape of a plan. It just needed the afternoon. At 8:10, Margot sat across from Ruth Eklund in the small conference room adjacent to her office. Ruth did not take the chair across the desk. She took the one beside it, which meant she was not performing authority. She was having a conversation. She folded her hands. Margot, the man whose name was on that board this morning. Theo Callahan. She paused. He served 8 years as a combat medic in the Army, 2 tours, the second one he volunteered for because he'd heard they were short on trauma experience in his unit. He separated and went straight into nursing school while his wife was sick. He finished his BSN the same month she died. She paused again. I know this because my nephew served in the same unit. He told me about a medic who did the work of 2 people so that no one else had to feel what he was carrying. I am sure you had your reasons for the termination. I would very much like to understand them, Margot looked at the attendance report on the table between them. Preston Haig's yellow sticky note was still on it. "May I keep this?" she said. Ruth looked at it. At the sticky note specifically, "I'd encourage you," she said, "to verify the data yourself, not through whoever prepared that summary." She stood. At the door she stopped. "Your father had a way of knowing what a person cost before he knew what a person earned. I always admired that in him." She left. Margot sat alone, with the phrase "before he knew what a person earned" turning in her head. She picked up the attendance report. She turned past the summary page for the first time. She buzzed her assistant. "Get me Rosalie Vega from HR. I need the raw system logs for Theo Callahan's badge records. Not summaries, the underlying data. Every clock-in, every override, every manual edit." Now Rosalie Vega arrived 12 minutes later. She was 55, read everything twice before speaking, and had kept meticulous records for 22 years the way some people kept meticulous gardens. Not for recognition but because disorder offended something in her personally. She set a printed log on the desk without being asked twice. The data was not the summary. For 8 weeks, Theo Callahan had badged in at an average of 6:52 in the morning. His shift began at 7. He had been early every day. Except on the 11 dates flagged in the summary as late arrivals, he had badged in between 7:08 and 7:24. Not 11 incidents. 11 specific dates. She pulled the system access log. Preston Haig had logged into the attendance database 19 times in the past 10 weeks. Each access was within a few hours of submitting his summary reports to her office. The raw badge data had been used to generate the summaries. The summaries did not match the badge data. Margot stood and walked to her window. Below, in the parking structure, a maintenance crew was repainting the lines of the ground level. She watched a man in an orange vest guide a line painting machine with the careful attention of someone who understood that the small things were what held the structure together. She went back to her desk and called up the HR extension for Darnell Webb. He answered on the second ring. "Darnell. This is Dr. Solis. I need to ask you some things about Theo Callahan. Off the record first." There was a pause. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "The 11 dates in the flag report. Do you know what was happening on those days?" Another pause, longer. "Some of them, yes. Tell me," he told her. 3 of the flag dates were days Josie had a fever and the school called before. 2 were days the bus on his route had a detour that added 20 minutes to the walk from the parking structure. 4 were mornings after. He had covered overnight shifts for nurses who had called out sick. He had stayed until 6:30 a.m., gone home, slept 2 hours, and come back. He had not logged the overnights as overtime because he had not wanted to create a budget issue. He had worked through the night and then been flagged for arriving 12 minutes late in the morning. Margot set the phone down after the call. She did not move for a while. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside was the official termination letter she had signed the previous morning, along with the envelope addressed to Theo Callahan. She had not yet sent it. She held the envelope. She put it back in the drawer. Rosalie was still standing by the door. "Rosalie, how long have you known the summary figures were wrong?" The older woman took a breath. "I knew the raw data didn't match what Mr. Haig was reporting. I didn't know how the discrepancy was being generated. I kept the system logs because Dr. Gerald Solis once told me that in a well-run institution the truth should always be recoverable, even when no one thinks to look for it, so I made sure it was." Margot looked at her for a long moment. "I owe that man an apology." Rosalie folded her hands. "You owe several people several things, Dr. Solis, but yes, him first." What happened next did not happen quickly. The things that matter rarely do. Margot spent 3 hours with the legal team and the compliance officer. By noon, they had a complete picture. Preston Haig had not only manipulated the attendance data, he had spent 14 months building a referral arrangement with a staffing agency run by his brother-in-law. Every time Mercy Ridge lost a nurse, resigned, or terminated, the agency received the call. Theo Callahan's position, specifically, would have generated a contract that paid the agency $31,000 to backfill. The legal team contacted the board chair at 2 in the afternoon. The compliance officer changed Preston Haig's system access at 2:15. Margot picked up her phone and dialed the number from Theo's personnel file. He answered, on the second ring. "This is Callahan." "Theo, it's Margot Solis." She paused. "I need to come and speak with you in person. There are things I owe you that I can't say correctly over a phone, if you're willing." A silence. Not an uncomfortable one. The silence of a man who thought before speaking. "Josie gets home from her grandmother's at 4, he said. "You're welcome after that." He hung up. Margot sat with the phone in her hand. and for the first time in many months she did not feel like the building's load-bearing wall. She felt like a person who had made a serious mistake and was being given the improbable opportunity to account for it. She rang her assistant. "Clear my afternoon." At 4:45, Margot stood on the concrete steps of a rental house on Birchwood Drive, with a manila envelope and a pot plant she had bought from the grocery store on the way, which in retrospect seemed strange, but the woman at the store had said it was a good one for windowsills, and it had seemed better than arriving with nothing. She had not knocked yet. The door opened. Josie stood in the doorway in a sweatshirt with a panda on the front. She stared at Margot for a full 3 seconds. "You're the lady from Daddy's truck." Margot opened her mouth. Josie looked at the potted plant. "Is that for us?" I thought. "Yes, if you'd like it." Josie took the plant from her with the confidence of someone who had been waiting for it and turned and walked back inside, and Margot had no choice but to follow. The house was small and warm and organized in the way a single parent organized things. Everything in its place, no decorative excess, but the refrigerator had drawings on it held with magnets shaped like vegetables, and the windowsill now had a plant on it. Josie set it there without deliberating. Theo came out of the kitchen with a dish towel over one shoulder. He looked at Margot. He looked at his daughter arranging the plant. He did not look surprised. "Dr. Solis." He gestured at the small table by the window. "Margot," she said. He nodded. They sat. Josie climbed into the chair beside Margot, without being asked, began drawing on a notepad with a set of markers that she arranged first by color. "Theo," she said, "the data was manipulated. All of it." Preston Haig had been editing the badge records directly. Every one of those 11 flags was fabricated or misrepresented. He was also routing our nursing vacancies to a staffing agency he had a financial arrangement with. "Your position would have generated that contract." She slid the envelope across the table. "It contains a reinstatement offer, a letter I wrote by hand, and the compliance report the board will see Monday morning." He looked at the envelope. He did not open it. "I came here," she said, "and this matters. I came here not because the board is going to require it, not because legal counsel advised it. I came because you deserve to hear an apology from the person who made the decision without an audience." Josie looked up from her drawing. Theo looked at Margot for a long moment. The dish towel was still over his shoulder. He was not performing forgiveness, and he was not performing resentment. He was simply looking at her in the way he looked at most things, directly, and without the need to fill the silence. "I'll make coffee," he said. He went to the kitchen. Josie patted the table next to her notepad. "Do you want to see?" she said. Margot moved her chair slightly and looked. Josie had been drawing a house with a tree in the yard. The tree had a swing. Under the tree were 2 figures. "Who are they?" Margot asked. "Daddy and me," Josie said. She paused. "I used to draw 3. She did not look up from the markers. "Mama, Daddy, and me." Margot did not say anything. "I stopped because Daddy gets quiet when I draw Mama. Not sad quiet. Just quiet like he's listening for something. I didn't want him to listen for something that wasn't there anymore." She picked up a green marker and began coloring the tree. "She's still there, though," Josie added matter-of-factly. "She's just not where you can draw her." From the kitchen came the sound of water running, and then the soft percussion of cabinet doors. Coffee being made by someone who had made it 10,000 times in the same kitchen, the ordinary sound of a house that had kept going. Margot looked at the drawing. She looked at the tree. She looked at the 2 figures under it. She blinked. Theo came back with 2 mugs and set one in front of her. He sat down. He looked at Josie's drawing the way parents look at things their children make, not to evaluate but to confirm. Josie held up her marker. "Daddy, can I add someone?" He looked at the drawing. He looked at Margot. "It's your drawing, Peanut." Josie selected a brown marker with the deliberateness of a person who had thought about this for a while. Margot watched her draw a 3rd figure under the tree. No one said anything about it. They drank their coffee. Josie told a long story about a turtle a boy in her class had brought for show and tell, and what happened when the turtle escaped under the reading carpet. Theo listened to the story as though he had not heard it 4 times already. Margot found herself listening too, actually listening, which was different from waiting for the conversation to become about something. When Josie's eyes started going soft around the edges, Theo carried her to her room and came back, would done it 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. He stood in the doorway. "You didn't have to come in person, I know." He nodded. He was quiet for a moment. "The first week I was at Mercy Ridge," he said, "I found a kid in bed 7, crying because his dad hadn't come in 3 days. He was 9. I stayed 2 hours after my shift playing cards with him. Darnell covered my first half hour the next morning so I could check on him before my round started. He paused. I wasn't trying to be late. I was trying not to leave things undone. She looked at him. I know that now. He nodded. She left at 9. He walked her to the door, and she stood on the porch step for a moment with the October air on her face. I'll see you Monday, she said. He looked at her. I'll be there at 6:50, he said. She nodded. She walked to her car. She did not look back, but she heard the door close with the soft particular sound of a house that had let her in once and might again. The board meeting on Monday was the kind of meeting that people at Mercy Ridge talked about afterward in the way people talk about things that felt inevitable once they happened. Preston Haig sat 2 seats to Margot's right. He had a new tie. He was smiling at his phone when she walked in. She nodded to the AV technician. The first slide, raw badge data, 8 weeks, sorted by date. The second slide, the access log. 19 manual sessions, all registered under one administrator account. The third slide, the account identifier. P. Haig, Deputy Administrator. That data is corrupted, Haig said. Anyone with admin credentials. The fourth slide, the staffing agency's incorporation documents. The agency's listed principal. The fifth slide, an email exchange between Haig and his brother-in-law, pulled by compliance from the institutional server dated 6 days after Theo Callahan's hire. Haig stood up. The door at the back of the boardroom opened. Theo walked in first. Dark scrub top, the same shoulders. Behind him came Darnell Webb in his respiratory therapy uniform, freshly pressed. Behind Darnell came Ruth Eklund, who had apparently stepped out for what she called a phone call 8 minutes before. She did not sit. She stood at the back of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice even, Darnell Webb has served the patients of this hospital for 16 years. His testimony regarding Theo Callahan, who was his charge nurse, and whom he served alongside on more than one occasion when the unit was short-staffed and the choices were hard, is the kind of testimony that I will stake my board membership on. I'll be signing an affidavit before I leave this building. Haig said something. 2 board members gestured for him to sit. The vote was 7-1. The compliance officer walked to Haig and asked for his badge. Haig looked at Margot. He opened his mouth and then he closed it. He put his badge on the table, walked out. Rosalie was standing in the doorway. She stepped aside to let him pass without looking at him. Then she walked to Margot's side of the table and placed a folder on it. Theo Callahan's complete personnel record. Every shift, every commendation, every note logged by charge supervisor over 2 years, most of which read some variation of first in, last out, no complaints. Theo had remained at the back wall the entire time. His hands were at his sides. He did not look like a man who had won something. He looked like a man who had stood in one place long enough for the truth to arrive. When the room emptied, he looked across at Margot. She looked back. She nodded. He nodded. Nobody else caught it. They were gathering their papers. 6 weeks passed. The first hard frost came to Cedar Falls in early November, and the maple on Birchwood Drive dropped everything overnight. Theo was reinstated as charge nurse of the pediatric ICU and offered a secondary role developing the unit's staffing protocols, which was the kind of work he did naturally anyway. He kept driving the same truck. He still ate lunch in the break room with the techs and the orderlies. On the second Saturday in November, Josie had a piece in her school's art show. 20 drawings on the gym wall, 4 of them hers. She had mailed an invitation herself on purple paper, addressed in careful block letters to Dr. Margot Solis, Mercy Ridge Medical Center, 6th floor. At the bottom in smaller letters, "Don't tell Daddy I invited you." Margot arrived 10 minutes early. Theo saw her from across the gym. He did not walk over right away. He did not look surprised. Josie saw her and came across the room like weather. She pulled Margot to the wall where her 4 drawings hung. The first was a dog the school didn't have. The second was her classroom in summer. The third was the house on Birchwood with the tree in the yard, 2 figures under it. The fourth was new. The tree again, 3 figures. Josie did not explain who the third figure was. Margot did not ask. After the show, they walked along the river path, November light the color of brass. Josie ran ahead at intervals and then came back to report on things. A woodpecker, a candy wrapper, a dog that was extremely large. Theo kept his hands in his jacket pockets. Margot kept hers in his jacket, which she was still wearing, because the morning had been colder than she expected, and he had simply handed it over in the parking lot and she had taken it. They spoke maybe 10 sentences on the walk. Most of them were about the frost and whether the path would ice before December. At one point, Josie ran back to show them an acorn she had found that was, according to her, the largest acorn in Iowa. Theo examined it with the full gravity of a man who took large acorns seriously. Margot watched him do it. She looked away before he could catch her looking. Near the end of the path, a red-tailed hawk came off a fence post and crossed the river low. Theo said half to himself Kate loved hawks. Then he was quiet for a while, and Margot did not say anything, and the river kept going and they walked. In the parking lot, Margot reached into her bag. She held out the jacket. He looked at it. He looked at her. He took it from her hands and folded it once and put it back in hers. Iowa gets cold in December, he said. Keep it a while longer. She did not argue. Josie came running back from the truck. Are you coming for dinner? She said to Margot. I asked Daddy and he said it was okay. She looked at Theo. He had the expression of a man who had in fact said it was okay and had not mentioned it and was not going to apologize for either of those things. She nodded. Yeah, Josie said, with the satisfaction of a 7-year-old who has arranged things correctly. By March, the frost had gone out of the ground, and the maple on Birchwood Drive was putting out its first red buds. Theo had moved with Josie into a house one street over, slightly larger, with a kitchen window that faced east and a backyard where Josie immediately identified the exact corner where a garden should go. On the third Sunday in March, Margot arrived at 2 in the afternoon with a flat of strawberry starts from the nursery in town. Josie had texted her Wednesday. She had not told her father. They planted the starts along the south fence while Theo rebuilt a section of the gate that had rusted through the winter. He worked steadily, measuring twice, and when he finished he stood back and checked the swing of it and then checked it again. Josie patted the soil around each plant with both palms. When they finished, she stood up and looked at the flat, empty tray, and then at Margot. Next year they'll have fruit, Josie said. That's how strawberries work, Margot said. Josie considered this. So you have to come back, she said. To see them. Margot was at the gate, his back to them, running a rag over the new hinge. He had heard. She could tell by the slight stillness in his shoulders. She looked back at Josie. I'll come back, she said. There had been no declaration, no formal conversation, no evening where someone said the word love or the word future or made any kind of case for anything. Ruth Eklund had pulled Margot aside at a hospital gala in February and said quietly, Your father always knew who was worth holding on to. I trust you're learning the same thing. Then she had gone back to her table. On Sunday evenings, Margot stayed for dinner. She had learned that Theo made good pasta and bad salad and didn't care which you said. She had learned that Josie required exactly one re-ask to eat her vegetables and then did so without further discussion. She had learned that the kitchen had a drawer that stuck and a light above the sink that buzzed, and that Theo had been meaning to fix both since October, which meant he would not fix them until something else broke first. She had learned these things the way you learn the layout of a place you keep coming back to, without meaning to, without making a decision about it. One night in March, after dinner, Josie asked her if she could braid hair. Margot said she hadn't braided anyone's hair in at least 15 years. Josie climbed down from her chair and stood in front of her and turned around without negotiating. Margot braided her hair. It was uneven. Josie looked at it in the dark window over the sink and said it was the best one she'd ever had. Theo was at the counter with his coffee watching. He did not say anything. He did not look away. No one said the word love. No one said the word family. Josie laughed at something. Theo refilled Margot's glass of water without asking if she wanted more. Outside in the corner of the yard, 12 strawberry plants sat in dark soil and waited for April to tell them what they were supposed to become. No one had been looking for this. That was the only reason any of them could trust it was real.